Hey guys, how's it going? Today we're going to talk about Frege's theory of sense and reference. Jumping right in, here's a nice little picture of how the theory is supposed to go. So we've got language on the one side, singular terms is one of the cases, and singular term in this case will express the propositional component or the sense. And yeah, as you can see, it says this relation is determined by the conventions or rules of the language, or perhaps by the beliefs of the speaker. So the language expresses the sense. The sense is the propositional component, the part of the proposition that is contributed by the singular term in this case. And the sense is a concept of the individual, and it sort of determines the individual, or it it picks out the individual, right? And so this is the sense itself. The relationship between the sense and the individual is not a semantic relation; it's a metaphysical relation. It's a relation between a concept of a sort and an object, whereas the relationship between the language and the individual is the semantic concept, or the semantic relation, namely the language refers to the individual. The singular term refers or denotes, picks out in this case. So that's just sort of the picture we'll come back to. So yeah, here we go. Remember, singular terms express their sense, and then the sense of a singular term determines the reference. So and then we can say that a singular term refers to its reference or its designatum. So let's take an example. Fido runs. The term Fido expresses a sense, and that sense determines a reference, namely the dog. So back to this picture. There's the language, the singular term. It expresses the sense, which is the propositional component, and that determines the individual, Fido. So here we go. Singular term is Fido, and that expresses its sense, which is the propositional contribution. Basically, the contribution that the word Fido makes to the thought that Fido runs, and then that determines the referent, named Fido. Now, that's how it works for singular terms on Frege's theory, but what about predicates? So let's take the example again. Fido runs, but remember this is So this is the distinction between sense and reference is thoroughgoing, meaning that it applies to all different parts of the language. So it applies both to the singular terms and to the predicates, as well as to things like sentences. So what do we do about runs? Well, so first of all, it's a little bit confusing to think about predicates as referring to anything. So, like, why should we think that they do? So Frege's theory kind of runs like this. So we've got runs here, which is the sort of right here. And the term here, the predicate, expresses the sense, which is the concept. So the concept of running, right? And so this sense determines a reference, but the reference of runs isn't like a single thing, not like the case of a singular term, right? It's not even for Frege, it's not even like the property of running or anything like that. The referent, it's a little bit more complicated for Frege, but sort of theory that we use these days, the referent of the concept is what we will call sort of technically the extension. And the extension of the concept is the set of things that the predicate applies to, right? So in this case, let's just stipulate that the predicate runs applies to Fido. It also applies to Usain Bolt and Marshawn Lynch and anyone else that runs, right? So within the extension of the predicate runs are all of these individuals, and so that's what it makes. If it makes sense to say that the predicate refers at all, it refers to this set of things that the predicate itself applies to. So that hopefully makes a little bit more sense of what it means to say that a predicate, if you want to say a predicate refers. Now, the way that predicates sort of work on Frege's theory is that the predicate runs expresses the sense, which is the concept of running in this case, right? And the concept of running determines the extension, right? So the concept, all the things that apply, that fit the concepts, or the concept sort of picks out all of the different things that are running, and then the extension is the thing that all applies to. Now, sentences, so like putting this all together, right? So we've got singular terms, we've got predicates. Now we want to combine them in the case of sentences. So we've got the sentence example, Fido runs, and we want to say that the sentence expresses, for Frege, he calls it a thought, or what we will call a proposition. And a thought, I mean, think about it, is a complete thing, right? It's got a subject and a predicate, or a singular term and some sort of predicate. If you just had two singular terms next to each other, like, I don't know, Fido and Kyle, right? That doesn't express a thought. That just names two things. But if you put a singular term and a predicate together, then you do get a thought. So the sentence expresses a thought, and the thought or proposition determines what? It determines a truth value. Now, so notice here that this difference in terminology, determining. So we can use the word determines in all the different cases, but in this case, it makes a little bit more sense to say that a thought determines a truth value rather than sort of like picks out some object. Right, like state of affairs or something like that. And so the sort of idea behind this is, remember, functions for Frege. So when it comes to sentences, there are these functions, namely like concepts, and the function is the sense of runs in this case, right? And we input the sense of Fido into the function of runs. And when we've got that, the sort of output of that function is either the true or the false, right? And we can tell by knowing the things that are in the extension of the predicate, right? So insofar as we know that that Fido is inside the predicate of inside the extension of the predicate of runs, then we know that the functional output is true. But if Fido is not in that extension, in the extension of runs, then the output is false. So finally, we get this picture here. So the sentence, Fido runs, expresses the thought or the sense of Fido and the sense of runs sort of put together. And when they are put together in this sort of functional unity, then we get out the truth value. Hope that is at least somewhat helpful. We'll be going over all this stuff again in section. Have a nice day.